Okay, so we are on day 2 of Mishlei Kagag. And it says Emes Knev Altim Kor Chochma Umusar Ubina. So purchase truth and don't sell it. And we said purchase because even though it can mean acquire, then it's mashma that it's using a consistent mashal. And yeah, so purchase or acquire truth and don't sell it. Wisdom, discipline, and rebuke. Sorry, wisdom, discipline / rebuke and understanding. Okay, so our questions were, what are the definitions of these 4 terms? And also, if musar means rebuke, then what does it mean to purchase rebuke? Like, for some reason, it seems to make more sense. What? Yeah, that's also true. Yeah. Actually, that's what Rabbeinu Yonah used to say. He said, "You all come to my Mishlei classes because you're all masochists." Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily need to be purchasing rebuke, right? Because purchasing could just apply on the MS, and then.
Correct. Yeah. We'll acknowledge that in a second, and then bina, we said, is difficult because if bina means knowledge that you derive with your own mind, it seems like the most you could do is purchase chachma, but then bina you have to get on your own, so those are some difficulties. Okay, 2, what does it,
also, just further on that, if you're selling it, then for that person it's good chachma.
Right, yeah, that's a funny thing, like, you can't, that's funny, right? In other words, don't sell it. Well, I'm not selling bina because when I sell it, by the time I sell it, it becomes chachma.
It's like it's like in Kabbalah
Machshavah. Yeah.
The reason why you can't teach it, we're going to teach it. We're going to do Russian trucking just because if you try to say it, then it's not
right. Yeah. Okay. So then, what does it mean to buy and sell truth? Obviously, that's a major question, especially because they're non-physical. Practically, what does it mean? How would you go about doing this? 3, and this is like the biggest fork in the road question, I think. How do we read the second half of the pasuk in line with the first half? So is it saying you should purchase and not sell these 4 things? Emes, chachma, musar, and bina. That's one reading. Second reading is you should purchase and not sell truth. And then this is saying, namely, chachma, musar, bina. I guess that was C. The second category, the intermediate category, is that it's dividing them into 2 groups. Truth is one type of thing that this applies to, and then chachma, musar, and bina is another thing. And I think a support for that reading, by the way, is it could say, for example, like, emes ubina knev altim kor, and then chachma musar blah blah blah. In other words, it could have divided it up 2 and 2, 3 and 1, something like that. So the fact that it does 1 and 3 might mean that it's like specifically like making a division between these. All right. 4, what is the harm in selling it? Right? Why not? Why shouldn't I sell it? 5, what is the havamina? Is the havamina that you should not buy these things? Is the havamina that you should buy it and sell it? Okay. So like this seems like there's potentially 2 havaminas here. 6, who is the audience of the pasuk? And we are pretty sure this is talking to the sun in the cluster, but who is the sun? 7, who is the original source of these goods? Where are you getting it from, and did they sell it? If it's saying you should buy it, presumably then maybe you got it through someone who was selling it. 8, how does this fit into the local cluster and sequence? Okay, so we had, and then we have Sadi Gon's translation, which is he adds a hey to all of them: the chachma, the musar, and the bina. Okay. So we had 3.5 approaches yesterday. He adds, don't sell the wisdom, the discipline, and the understanding.
Oh, ha.
Yeah, not a hey. Yeah.
The letter hey.
He does.
No, I'm sorry. But you mean, you do, but you mean like ha. Like
Yeah. Okay, so we had 3 approaches yesterday, 3.5 approaches. Okay, so we had, I want to review and develop these before we go to the Mepharshim. So we had Sean's approach, which I think is the most wise shot, which is buy truth and don't sell it means that you should be willing to incur costs, right? Whether it's monetary costs or like giving up time or giving up, energy, whatever you should like expend in order to get truth. And then don't sell it means that you should not even if you had to go through like these costs in order to get it, you shouldn't perpetuate that. Okay. And then Sean learned Chachma, Musa, and Bina as expansions on what truth is. And he was saying how it's in the order of how much resistance there is to giving it out. So in other words, Chachma is something that is the most like, I guess, the widely available.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to say how you were, it's the most widely available. Musar, you might be like, Musar is much more specific, like case by case basis. And then Bina is something that you like acquire through your own hard work. You know, I feel like I'm missing a point though. What was your, how did you tie that second half into the first half?
Yeah, that in terms of selling is is making things less accessible.
Right.
Right. And so Chachma is the thing that you're least resistant to making accessible. Least resistant
to making accessible. Okay.
Right.
To making accessible. Yeah. Okay. Right.
Then Musar is something that, right, it's more specific, but also giving out Musar puts you in like a state of vulnerability because that might, like, people might react poorly to it.
Right.
It's something that people tend to be more hesitant towards giving, and really it's telling you no, you should be free in this type of truth as well.
Right.
And also, right, that like I was thinking about like scientific advancement, you see people come up with like a great idea and then they hoard it all to themselves. They try and monetize it, they try and make it so that they can get the most advancement out of it. And it's not about improving society or improving the world. It's about like, how can I make this?
Okay, so I think the step I was not missing, but just not getting clearly, is that the reason why it's in that order is going on the selling, meaning that you would be most tempted to sell Bina, right? Meaning as opposed to giving it out for free, and then and then less and less. Yeah.
No, I was gonna do my question.
Yeah. So I want to actually,
I have a question about this.
Yeah, we're gonna work on it still. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So why shouldn't you?
Okay, right. So that's gonna be the question: is why shouldn't you? I actually want to pair this with Metzudas David because it's the one that I saw that is the closest to what you're saying. So this is a weird thing for Metzudas David to do. He brings it into halacha, which you don't usually see him do. So he says, Metzudas David, he says, emes kaneh, acquire truth. It's weird. They put him above the Rinach Mias for some weird reason. Isn't he usually at the bottom right?
I don't think the Rinach Mias is 4 paragraphs on the bottom.
Yeah. All right. Strange. Anyway, so emes kaneh, limud Torah b'sachar. You should learn Torah for payment, meaning you should be willing to pay to learn Torah. Im lo matzasa limud b'chinam. If you don't find anyone to teach it to you for free. B'im kol zeh, but nevertheless, al timkor, you should not sell l'lamda la'acherim b'sachar, to teach others for payment. Ki'im lamad b'chinam, but you should only ki'im lamod b'chinam. Yeah, you should only teach it for free. Yeah, you always have to like figure out which one's teaching, which one's learn here. He's saying you should teach it for free. So in other words, you should be willing to pay for Torah, even if you can't find anyone to teach it for free, but you should not teach it for payment. You should teach it for free. And then he says, Chachma es ela lo tilamid tilamod b'sachar, tilamid b'sachar. You should not teach Chachma for payment. Kihema, Chachma and Musar and Bina. Kihema Torah shabal peh, because those things are Torah shabal peh. The asur lakachas aleim sachar, and it's asur to take payment for teaching Torah shabal peh. Aval likro mikra yuchal lakabel sachar, but to teach someone to read psukim, you are allowed to take payment for. Okay, so just to read this in the halacha, we spent 2 weeks on this last year in Rambam Bekius, many hours. That was the longest sugya we did last year, I think. Taking payment for teaching Torah. Did you guys do this in? Yeah, right. So you're somewhat familiar with this, right? Yeah. So I wanted to just.
I think it came up in.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. So I'm going to read it not from the Gemara, but from the Rambam, just so we can get the facts here. So he says, Yeah. Hayam minhag hamadina likach malamin. No. Yeah. So if the custom in the locale that you're in is for the teacher of kids to be paid, then you should give him payment. And he's chayav to teach the kids with payment until they can read all of Torah B'Ksav. Okay. Most of us haven't done that yet. Okay. Makom shenagu l'lamed Torah b'chsav b'sachar, mutar l'lamed b'sachar. In a place that's accustomed to teach Torah b'chsav for payment, it's mutar to teach for payment. Aval Torah b'alpeh, asr l'lamda b'sachar. But you cannot teach Torah b'alpeh for payment. Shenemar, as it says, and this is where it compares it to Hashem, re'eli marti eschem chukim u'mishpatim kasher tzivani Hashem Elokai. So Moshe says, see, I have taught you statutes and judgments as Hashem commanded me, v'gomer, etc. Ma'ani b'chinam limadati. Just as I, just as I was lamadati, just as I learned for free, you also learned free from me, from Moshe Rabbeinu. So too for generations, it should be for when you teach for all other generations, it should be for free. Just like you learn from me. I just want to finish reading the halachic just to get it in our minds. If you can't find someone to teach for free, yilmod basachar, you should learn for payment. Okay. And the doofus Rambam say they get the tense mixed up. They say that you should teach for free for payment, but that doesn't make any sense. Doofus. Shenemar, it says emes kaneh. It says you should purchase truth. That's what brings in the pasuk. I assume this is what the Gemara you were talking about said. Yachol yilamed la'acherim b'sachar. You might think that you can teach others for payment. Tamalomar, the pasuk says al timkor, don't sell. Halamarta she'asr lo lamed b'sachar. This teaches you that it's asr to teach for payment. Afal pi shalimdo rabo b'sachar, even though your Rav taught you for you paying. Okay, yeah, Isaac.
Just about the drasha from Moshe Rabbeinu. Didn't he learn for free also? Why?
yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I don't know.
So this is a question I have if you should really be teaching for free.
Yeah.
And that obviously to me seems to imply that that's showing that you have a full understanding of what you learned, since part of what you learned is that you should be teaching for free.
Whoops, didn't learn that one. Yeah.
Then I wonder if part of the problem with learning from someone who charges isn't just that, you have to pay, that's unfortunate, but that and that it's unfair or something, but rather that it's a compromise to some degree in what you're learning, because it's going to be coming from someone who's there's a flaw in there. Yeah, that might be distorted because of their own.
Right. So David, that I think goes a little bit into David's approach, which we can take. These are all on the table. David's approach, we may as well get all of them on the table. So David's approach and Yeshua's approach was that if you start relating to truth as a commodity, it's going to or as a means to an end, it's going to distort your relationship with it. That you're not doing it for its own sake, you're making it into something. So either it's going to corrupt your relationship with it, or it's going to corrupt the truth in your mind itself. Like if you're, let's say, for example, not that this is the same thing, but a judge who takes a bribe. So you're not even allowed to take a bribe to make a decision that you would have already made. Like, let's say I was going to poskin this is that you're chayav to pay, and then your opposing litigant bribes me to make that same psak. It's still going to taint my mind and start influencing me to look at truth as a means to an end and get payment off of it. So it's going to distort your relationship to it. Okay, so let's do this though, which is Sean was not saying it in terms of Torah B'Ksav and Torah B'Alpeh and halacha. The Metzudas David and the Rambam are. So let's just explore the idea, but keeping Sean's idea in mind and their idea in mind. I don't know if they're the same idea and Metzudas is just expressing it in line with the Masorah, or if these are two different ideas.
Was Isaac's question addressing the fact that you could pay for Torah B'Ksav?
Yeah. It was his question. Your question was Moshe Rabbeinu's. The argument is Moshe Rabbeinu says, just like I learned Torah B'Alpeh for free, so too I'm teaching it to you for free. And then Isaac's question was, but he learned Torah B'Ksav for free also. So shouldn't you also be prohibited to sell Torah B'Ksav? Yeah, I think the plain shot answer to that is if you look at the halachos, I was looking into this again this morning without trying not to get drawn into the whole thing, is the Meiri basically argues that when you're teaching them Mikra, you're really just teaching them how to read. And that's really what you're being paid for, and you're teaching them how to read through Torah B'Ksav. So
and so it's not you're not paying them, you're not being paid for teaching Torah Shabbat, you're being paid to teach them how to read.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like part of Torah Shabbat is that when you need it, you're learning.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And again, this is a whole sugya, but I'd say like simple answer, and that's the answer. So
I thought we should kind of go to you guys into Lima when we learn that sugya.
What did you like?
Is Torah just any Torah that's written, or is there a particular definition?
It is the 24 books of Tanakh. Yeah. I was splitting Ezra and Nehemiah. Yeah. Nothing else. Yeah.
And Gemara is
Torah Shabbat Peh is a whole definition. That's a much more complicated thing to define. Yeah. Okay, so
well, Torah Shabbat as opposed to
right, but I think that falls under the Isser also.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into the halachic nuances of this. This is a whole thing. Okay, so let's go back to Sean's question and to Sean's interpretation with Isaac's questions, which is so we have to look at each of the two chidu. Let's treat it as though there's a havmina, right? So what's the havmina that I shouldn't pay for it, right? That's what it's saying. You should buy it. And then what's the havmina that, okay, I paid for it, so I'm going to I can sell it, or I should sell it, or something like that.
Okay.
And then how is this telling, like, what idea is this teaching you about this? Yeah.
If we're bringing in halakha,
We don't have to. You don't feel constrained to that. Yeah.
that's fine. But we did talk about in shiur last year, right? That the person who's selling it is not supposed to be selling it, right? In a literal sense.
Yeah.
So in that case, right, you are enabling somebody to do something that they shouldn't be doing in order to.
Okay.
That was one of the.
Okay. Right.
But that doesn't, in terms of my idea.
Yeah.
Right, my idea was not constrained to just.
Correct. Just the reason why I don't like that is that seems like a very secondary reason, like just enabling someone to do something bad. That doesn't seem to be like an intrinsic part of the idea here. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's almost like one havamina.
Yeah.
Where we're saying like you don't want to commoditize commoditize like the chachma.
Yeah.
Or the truth, and so that's why you don't want to buy it, right? Well, if I'm buying it, then I'm automatically.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. Okay.
I'm automatically going to be treated.
Okay, so that's unifying. Okay, I see it. Yeah.
And then the second havamina is, well, now that I've bought it, I've already turned it into something bad. It's not like it's going to become worse if I sell it now.
Yeah. Okay, I hear that. There was two things I was going to say yesterday, which I just want to throw out on the table, not related directly to Sean's idea, but one thing is that a phenomenon of, I guess the closest experience I've had to like the experiential thing of buying truth is, and I might have said this before, is that I'm going to put on my curmudgeon hat for a second. In my day, there was this thing called the Torah tape library. Tapes were these things that were these plastic things, but the way it worked was it was not available for free, and you had to buy the tapes, and I believe it was $5 per cassette tape. Okay.
Back in those days.
Which in those days, it was like $1 million. Yeah. Yeah. So what you would do is you would, and I think you could rent them for $1 or something like that, but like you, I think the purchasing amount was $5. So what we would do, it was like, you would look through the Torah tape library list, with like these many tapes, you would carefully select, what am I going to pay money for? And then you would buy it and you would get your money's worth. Like you would listen to it again and again. First of all, you listen to the whole thing, right? And you listen to it again and again. And like, it would be something that was, you would attach greater value to because you had to pay for it, And nowadays, what do we all do? Just go on, I'm gonna listen to a shiur. Okay, I'm bored. I'm listening to another shiur. Like I'm just gonna, and we just don't have that relationship to the thing anymore because it's free, So that's just one experience I want to put on the table, that purchasing it on the one hand can commoditize it in a bad way, but it can also make it more valuable in your eyes that people pay for it, like that was, I think, so there's I used to have a spar on this. There's machlokas between Socrates and Torah about whether it's good for teachers to be paid, and I think if I remember correctly, Socrates' argument was like, this is the most valuable thing in the world. And it would like, I don't know, maybe that's not his argument. Maybe it just came up in the discussion, but like people would value it more if it was like, you see how willing people are to pay for stuff just because there's a high price tag on it. Like that is a move that people make, or let's say like, certain people, there's the exclusivity could be like a kiyum in the thing, that there have been various movements in the Masorah about how exclusive or how accessible to make learning, and each one has had its like detriments and benefits, so like there's a certain like another example again just comes to mind is Bruce Lee used to charge a lot for one-on-one lessons, and when asked why, he said, because I'm worth it, and he was like, he trained a lot of so I think that's just another angle I want to like get on the table.
So based on that, then I think that the second half is stronger than not just like, oh, I've already commoditized it, but like once you do acquire it and you're like, oh wow, this is worth it.
Right.
You're like, well, if it's so worth it, I wouldn't have seen this if I hadn't bought it. So I'm gonna make this guy buy it.
Okay, so that's an interesting type of second Havamina, because only after you've purchased it do you fully recognize the worth of the thing, and then that's what raises the Havamina.
Right.
Yeah. Hold on, interesting. I was gonna say one more thing, but maybe I just made the 2 points. Maybe it was just 1 point. Give me 1 second. Oh no, I'll remember the other one. Yeah.
So then on that Havamina,
yeah,
it seems even like not only could you, but it's like you should sell it.
Yeah.
Because why should you rob someone of the opportunity to value it like you got to do when you bought it?
Sorry, just say it one more time. It didn't register in my head. Yeah.
Like if the reason it was good that you bought it,
yeah,
you value it more.
Yeah.
Shouldn't you?
Right.
Like facilitate.
Yeah. Right.
Else
yeah. Exactly.
Right. Like you should do it.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's a strong Havamina now, I think. Yeah. Yeah. Isaac.
I mean, I think what we said before still applies, that that's going to warp the way that you relate to it, because
you mean as the teacher specifically?
As the teacher
specifically. Oh yeah, right.
Because now it's like you said,
yeah,
it's just like a tool for you to make money.
Yeah.
As opposed to appreciating the truth of it.
Yeah. So I just want to say this one more thing on calling you Sean, is that the other thing I was going to mention, and I didn't ask for permission to share this, but I knowing him, he's fine with it. So I was talking to Zach about Zach used to live here, and then he moved to Israel, and his Rebbe is Rav Chaim Ozer, so, and I know when Zach was in the States, he would send Rav Chaim Ozer like tons of questions and on voice messages and stuff like that. So I was asking Zach when he came to visit, I was like, what's it like living in Israel? And we were talking about that, and I said, and what's it like having much more access to your Rebbe, So he said it's actually been more difficult, because he said, because I have this access, I'm in this awkward position of like, I don't want to be like annoying, and like constantly like thrusting myself into his presence or whatever, So I said, have you asked him about it? Like how you should strike a balance. So he said, I did. And his answer to me, he said, Rav Chaim Ozer's answer to me was, your job is to pursue Torah from me, and it's up to me whether and it's my job to I have to manage my own, my own thing like that. So that made me realize there is an inherent, like we were saying how it would be hypocritical if you, not hypocritical. There would be a mistake in you buying it and then selling it. Wait, hold on, am I saying that right? Yeah. But in other words, there can be this phenomenon of two different standards, one from the perspective of the teacher, one from the perspective of the student, and each one is rational in their own framework. It is rational for the student to be willing to pay money to get the Torah, but it would be irrational for the teacher to only distribute it through payment. It doesn't necessarily, it's not one-to-one correlation. Yeah, Sean, what were you saying?
So I definitely recognize in terms of on an individualistic level, of paying for Torah makes that person respect Torah.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the same time, on a societal level, I'm not necessarily sure that that's
okay. Right. Yeah.
If you look at how society has progressed, and primarily in the last centuries, where public education has become free, in a sense, or not necessarily accessible to everybody. Yeah. Right? I mean, it's being paid for the society. Yeah. Or by the society, that has completely changed the way in which people and the level of education that exists within the world, which is completely accelerated.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good argument. Yeah, right. And the thing is is that there might be in other words, to a certain extent, and maybe I'm tipping my my economical hand here, but to a certain extent, then the conditions are always going to be ripe to promote a capitalistic tendency, like for example, there are always going to be fewer teachers than students, and teachers have limited time, and there might naturally be like a thing where like just for I only have a certain amount of time in the day, and like I have to make some sort of arbitrary thing of like to decide who I'm going to teach, and like that might manifest itself as payment or whatever, but so from a practical standpoint, and what I'm saying is that from a practical standpoint, there might be factors that push towards the model of students needing to pay for teaching, but that is not, but at the same time, it's more beneficial for society the more free it is. Like I think there's
this tension of
tension. That's the word I was looking for. There's a tension, right?
Sacrificing individuals' respect for information,
in
order to get the masses educated.
Correct. Sure.
I think when you require payment, then it also puts a barrier in front of accessing it.
Right.
But that some people are not going to, be able or willing to overcome.
Right. That's the story with Hillel, right? That he couldn't afford. That was back when they were charging to go into the Beis Midrash, and he couldn't afford it, so he like climbed up onto the roof and went on the thing, and then started snowing. He almost died, right? And then that was so like that was a literal barrier to entry. Let's go.
So practically.
I want to bring this down to practicality.
Does the teacher say, okay, look, I'm not going to go solicit. If you want to come and try to learn from me, whatever, I'm available to learn from, but I guess there's a certain point where if the student, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out like how this, like what a scenario would be where it's okay for the teacher to then accept money, even though as long as he didn't initiate, also, as long as it almost sounds like, whether maybe there's only so much time he has and there's a lot of kids offering it, so the kid goes, well, here, let me at least pay you that way, like I have the one who has the time with you. I don't know, just trying to think of like some
right. So that's another question as well, which I see. It's really hard for me to make the decision about. Like, I don't want to go into the sugya of taking money for Torah. Like, I want to keep this in a Mishlei realm. But like, I do feel like that would be a different type of a scenario where, if you said, "I'm only going to teach you if you pay me,"
right,
or "I'm only going to teach if I'm paid," that'd be one thing. But if you use other criteria for selecting who you teach and you don't teach in your limited time, that might be a different thing. I don't know, unless you're going to get into what David's saying, where even that's going to like warp your relationship to the truth. All right, so let's bring this into Mishlei.
How do you take a step in that direction?
I don't even know. That's what I want to try to do right now. Well, but the step I want to take is I want to take a step away, even though I think it was good to bring it into the halachic realm. Let's try to bring this into Mishlei realm a little bit more.
So I had thought of this before. I kind of want to link it back to the pasuk before.
Okay, good. I was going to actually ask that might be our direction of like linking this into the cluster, because again, right now the biggest problem I have on Sean's approach is this does not sound like advice for a kid. And I know the last pasuk was about when the kid is older, so maybe we're not talking to a kid anymore, but I'm not fully sold on that. So go ahead. Let's look at the last pasuk before we before you say your thing. So the last pasuk was Sean's approach being that you should be willing to pay for it, but you shouldn't perpetuate that. You should teach it for free. So the last pasuk was Shema la'avicha ze yiladecha ve'al tavuz ki zachna imecha. Listen to your father, the one who begat you, and do not disparage your mother because she is old.
So I want to use I think it was Metzudas David's idea from Ve'al tavuz that like like the knowledge when it's like old to you, or like when it's like
okay, right. So no, it wasn't him, but it was someone else, right? It was probably Renachmias that don't disparage knowledge just because you've been over it a lot.
Like that idea. And so then going into the next pasuk, where so the first part is fine, like you should it should be something that's worth it for you to you should view the worth of it. And you should be able to, and you should buy it even. But then not selling it could come at based on what I was saying before, like on David's idea that relating to it in the wrong way will make it so that it's not like really truth anymore. Is like, well, there's a certain point where you're going over these things, and it's to you, it's no longer Chachma Musar, it's just like, it is, and like, in that sense, I guess you stop relating to it as those categories, and you start relating to it as like, this is something that I just know, and like therefore I can sell it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in other words, because it becomes more mundane through your familiarity with it, then it gets to the point where you relate to it as like a commodity that you can sell. You know what that reminds me of? Reminds me, like a good example of that is like there are like professional intellectuals or speakers who like make genuine like discoveries and like like real advances in knowledge, and then they just do seminars and speeches where they just give a canned like speech where they're just like almost like you could replace them like with a recorded version of themselves, where it just, you know, like they start to treat it as not a living thing anymore. Right.
I think that kind of goes into part of the hobby as well. It's just like there's a certain point where you just start to see it no longer as a true thing. And as you first saw it, right? So like when you first bought it, you're like, yeah, of course, this is like a great thing. I should buy it. And you know, it's priceless. And then it like becomes mundane in the fact that like, oh, these are just ideas that I know. And so then fine, I can sell them. Like it's not like this great thing anymore in your eyes. Like,
Right.
I feel like
that's a good approach.
A good analogy for that is comedians. They have to like they spend this time polishing their act, getting it better. But like the good comedians are the ones that once they get it down, each show isn't a carbon copy of each other one. There is like some crowd work, you know, there's a level of like shifting a bit on the tone of the joke, even after they've gotten it down. Because they've gotten it down so well. It doesn't feel like you're getting something rehearsed. You're like, wow, this feels so smooth and natural. It wasn't like,
right. Okay, so but I still feel like this is not Mishleic, you know. So like, what is the Mishleic practical decision making insight here? And again, that's what I'm starting to realize that maybe starting off with the Metzudas David was a little got us on the wrong foot. Not that he's wrong, but I'm saying like in terms of what I'm looking for.
Well, I think like the reason why you want to get knowledge is that you know, gives you insight about the world that you know can like affect you. And by selling it, then it's going to prevent that.
Okay. So let's explore that route. By selling it, it's going to prevent that. So that see. Okay, maybe that's another thing. Also, is that I think that this is the question you need to answer. I think, Sean, which is why shouldn't I sell it? And David's answer to me right now is the primary candidate because it's going to change your relationship to the thing. So I think there are two approaches you could take. One is that it's going to change your relationship to the thing in your, you know, in the way you're taking it. The other is that it's going to change the accessibility to other people, and that's going to affect you somehow, you know. Like for example, I'll give you an example of that. We know, I mean, this is a well-known thing that like, you know, I learned a lot from my teachers. I learned more from my peers, but I learned the most from my students. So you're really, if you're limiting your student pool, you're shortchanging yourself, right? If you're saying like, I'm only going to get this for payment, unless you're going to make an argument that like getting payment, receiving payment is going to somehow like give you the better students, you know. But I think all things being equal, a quantitative restriction is going to make your learning less fruitful. And I'll give you an example of this is that, you know, one of the major changes that I implemented coming to yeshiva to teach is it used to be that I would only teach in a high school classroom and the only people who would hear what I taught would be the students who were in that class. But now literally everything I teach is available to everybody. And that has been so much better for my own chachma, both because I get feedback from other people who I wouldn't have ordinarily gotten feedback from because now it's accessible to them. Secondly, me making it accessible to people ups the level of responsibility I need to take over my own learning. Like not that I'm not casting aspersions on you, Chizkiyahu, but like I don't know if you've ever had this feeling when you're teaching like kids of like whatever, like the only people who are hearing this is like these kids. So like I can check the facts later, or I can like it doesn't really, you know, like if I make a mistake, like it's not the worst thing in the world. I've definitely had these feelings of like when teaching like ninth graders or like you know, like okay, whatever, like you know, at the end of the day, like don't bother me. But the fact that like I know that everything that I teach is going to potentially be available for anyone to listen to. And then I have to like I have to take responsibility for that. You know, it's like, it's better for my learning. So that would be like an argument I'm saying for like your approach of the accessibility itself affords you a Mishleic advantage. and the restriction is shooting yourself in the foot. Yeah. You want to add to that, or?
Yeah, I think also, like I was saying, in terms of progress and innovation, those things come about from the freedom and exchange ideas.
Right. And that for the system, it's going to be better not only for you. System,
but like if a lot of times you see like how science builds off of itself.
Yeah.
Right? And you have one person has one piece of the puzzle and another person has another piece.
Right.
And if you're so concerned with keeping a lid on your big innovation, right, and capitalizing off of it, then the other person who has another piece that's going to further generate growth within your idea is
right. So just as a side point for that I feel like we mentioned this fairly recently. Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim were killed for two reasons. Well, okay, the Chazal give two reasons. One is that they didn't show each other kavod. The other is that they were stingy with their Torah. Right. So, and I think that those are related. It shows that they're relating to Torah in an egotistical framework as a means of like if self-enhancement, like if I show you kavod, then that's like taking glory away from me. Or if I share my Torah with you, then that's like you were saying, So I think that you could say that they were killed because of their own bad midos. But you could also say it would have been disastrous for the Masorah if that trend continued, where like people were not were the V-balling Masorah, were not making Torah, there wasn't this healthy ecosystem of Torah sharing that would lead to the greatest results in Talmud Torah. Yeah, Isaac?
I have another consequence.
Okay.
That if you are, one of the reasons why a person might want, MS, Chachma, etc. is like for public reasons.
Yeah.
And if you charge for it, then that's gonna cause people to lose respect for you. Like if you ask Einstein, like, hey, can you explain relativity to me?
Right.
He's like, sure, just give me $100.
Yeah, right. So that's the Rambam's argument I'm not going to read it now because we don't have time, but that's the Rambam's argument for why you shouldn't take payment for learning, for teaching, because it diminishes the grandeur of Torah and for the person himself. Yeah, just one more question on Sean's thing, just before I lose the train of thought. So can we just unify the ideas a little bit more in terms of, to me, it's like two ideas. One is you should be willing to pay, you should even be willing to pay to get Torah. And the other is don't sell it, because then that's really like shortchanging yourself and the Torah society. And, those two seem like two separate ideas. Yeah.
So I would say that the unifying thing is that a person who's not willing to pay for Torah, right, is also, right, in terms of their perfection, missing out, and the person who's not willing to sell. So it's focusing on these two dimensions, in which a person is shortchanging themselves in terms of the Torah.
Okay, that's very interesting. And also this is an interesting thing because this does not follow the normal economic laws of like goods in general, that where like, if you're willing to pay for it, that means that it is worth that much and you should sell it for that. Like, this is an exception to the rule, right? I mean, I'm not saying it's the only exception, but yeah.
Could I kind of go back on the order?
Yeah.
So now I was kind of realizing too that maybe part of the reason, not that it's more persuasive or tempting, I guess, to do it, is including that the more, it's like, oh, it's a specific thing.
Yeah.
I got created. I want to, but also I think it's like Chachma seems closest to MS. So you're more likely to be like, okay, like I'm not going to necessarily make that mistake because it's like it's basically MS. But as you get further into Musar and Bina, it may not even resemble MS2 anymore. You think, well, this isn't really MS at this point.
Why?
Because it's so applied, it seems like it's not really like just a fundamental fact. It's more like this, like a nuance.
Okay, I hear that. Yeah.
And so you might be looking at, and so it might be trained that like, oh, then you're not understanding how this is an aspect of MS2. Like, this really is MS. And that might also be a negative.
Okay, I hear that. Yeah, that's good. Okay, just in the remaining time, I feel like we would be shortchanging ourselves if we didn't do this other type of approach. So Rabbeinu Yonah, okay, and this is very relevant to, I'm not saying this to make you feel bad, but all the people who missed David Fader's thing on Shabbos about like how you should choose a job, like, it was very, very good. And like, I think it'd be worth it to like maybe talk to a bunch of people who also missed it and have him do it for you guys and then record it, because the discussion was the main thing. Like it was a very, very good, beneficial thing. So anyway, just not that I'm trying to like rope him into stuff, but like, I know that the people here who missed it weren't the only ones who like would gain from it. So like, maybe do that. Anyway, so Rabbeinu Yonah says along those lines, Emes Kanei, left column, V'al Timkor Chachma Mus Rambina, Tefazr Mamon Liknos Chachma. You should not squander, that implies waste, but like spend freely, spend your money freely to buy Chachma. V'al Timkor Osa, Ba'ad Kol Revach, and don't sell it for any amount of profit, Achre Shelamadata Osa, after you've learned it. Rotzlomar, Shalo taniach esek haTorah v'tishkachena kidei lasok b'schora. Don't leave aside your involvement in Torah and forget it so that you can be involved in business. Okay. Afal pi she'ata left side, thank you. Afal pi she'ata ro'eh b'schoracha revach alfei zahav v'kesef. Even if you see your business that you can make a profit of thousands of dollars. Ki ein limkor haTorah ulhachlif osa b'zahav v'rav pninim. You should not exchange Torah for abundant gold and precious jewels. So the audience he's talking to is, see, we were talking to someone who's in the process of learning, okay, right? And it applies throughout the entire process of learning. He's saying, let's say you were in yeshiva for like X number of years, okay, and you've you've done your time, yeah, you've acquired a certain amount of chachma. And then now you go into schora, you go into the workforce. So he's saying, don't make this mistake of leaving aside your involvement in Torah, not for all the money in the world. Okay, so my question now is, what's that havmina? That seems to be a very different havmina. And the havmina here, based on the audience, seems to be, look, I got my years of learning, and he's saying, no, this is another critical juncture where either you continue your learning and give up the large amount of profit that you can make, or you seek that profit and you give up your involvement in learning. So I think like that's a targeted havmina that we didn't even touch on. Yeah, sure.
So I think it would be that, well, the things that Torah is teaching you, the mitos and the ideas that it can use, or ultimately strategies to get you to the next place of some sort of reward or pleasure in life. And what's wrong with constantly wanting to have more, and even knowledge that I want to have. So it's not looking at it as like a final, in and of itself a good that like is what you're constantly like trying to maintain. Yeah. But just another stepping stone, something else.
You're saying sorry, I got started on the wrong foot. Are you explaining what the mistake is or what the idea is? The havmina. Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, yeah.
And then I ended it with
yeah.
But the havmina, again, this is basically that you're looking at it as just another means to get to the next reward.
Right. And therefore this is the reward, but this is not the reward. Right. In other words, yeah. So again, just
the learning in itself is not itself. It's like not realizing that the learning is like already the good.
Right. And the money is a means of the learning. So there's a certain phenomenon of don't make the ikr into the tafel under the excuse that you're trying to get more of that ikr. Yeah. In other words, like the guy who the whole reason why you're working and making money is so that you can be involved in limud Torah. Right. So the guy who's willing to leave his limud Torah to make more money, right, that shows that he's not really making the Torah his ikr. Yeah. Something to think about. Okay, so just the takeaway. I want to go back. Can we just distill the takeaway of this approach in the most practical terms that we can of Sean's approach? So practically speaking, you should be willing to incur costs to get the chachma, but for your own benefit, then you shouldn't impose costs on the teaching of that chachma. For the reason I said, because the more accessible you make it, the better your learning will be. For the reason Sean said, that in terms of the society, then it's the more Torah is available, then the better the benefits are going to be. And I'm still, yeah.
Okay, maybe tying this back into the father talking to.
Okay, good. That was the thing of some of this as well. And then Chaim was taking a different approach with that. You were taking the metaphorical approach, which is nice, but not the literal son thing. Yeah.
Overall, right?
Yeah.
The father is trying to teach the son how to derive information from events and act properly within the world.
Yeah.
Right. And so at a certain point, you need to understand the barriers towards your development of knowledge.
Yeah.
Part of them is the aversion to spending.
Yeah.
On it, right. And to really putting in the work.
Yeah.
And the other part is the aversion to like sharing what you've developed and what you've gotten.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's a certain, like we said, egotism, self-centeredness that can come about from acquiring these things and spending so much time on them that you feel a sense of entitlement to them.
Yeah.
And that sense of entitlement is going to end up undermining the entire pursuit that you were doing.
Okay. Although I like the entire point you said, I think the first half of what you said is all we need, which is that if you look at the things that he was saying to his son, then he's giving different reasons why, different possible deterrents for being involved in Chachma. So one was that it's not, well, the first one has to do with the relationship. The second one is because the people who are living the lives of not Mishlei are having such a fun time, right? That's the don't be jealous of sinners. Then the other one is the group of people who are like the pleasure, the hedonistic lifestyle, and that might be a deterrent. And the other one is the cost, right? The cost might be a factor. You might not, like there are people who like, it's not that they're attracted to these like hedonistic lifestyles. They just don't want to put in the investment for the learning. And this is like addressing that.
Learning Torah is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's going to require a lot of willpower, a lot of time.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. All right. I think that fits into the local cluster to my satisfaction. That's good. All right. Good work. Okay.
We're not going over the other one.
Thank you.
No, we're not going over the other one. Yeah. All right.